Welcome to Immaterial World,
a dedicated and transparent space to recenter how we explore glamour, magic, culture, and everything else we love together.
Immaterial world, come meet me in the immaterial world. As far as the galaxy goes, we're flying in the immaterial world. Immaterial world, come meet me in the immaterial world. With mind and body and soul, we're flying in the immaterial world. The immaterial world.
Katelan Foisy is a multidisciplinary artist and writer whose work blends vintage aesthetics with mysticism, symbolism, and modern narrative. Renowned for her mixed media art, photography, and design, she moves fluidly between the worlds of fine art, music, fashion, and esoteric culture. I am so excited about our guest today, Jezmina. I know that Katelan is a close friend of yours who I had not met, but when I went and looked at her work, it is so in alignment with my personal aesthetic. So I'm super excited to talk to her today about all of her inspiration, all of her work, all of the places that it exists, but it really speaks to 1996, okay? I was 12 years old. I was going through my first house perfection year. And that year, the music video for Tonight Tonight by the Smashing Pumpkins came out. And I looked at that and I was like, that's what I want my aesthetic to be. I didn't even know what that meant. I just really knew that's what I wanted my aesthetic to be. That was the same year, too, of Romeo and Juliet with Claire Danes and Leonardo DiCaprio. And I was like, yes, this look is so for me. And it has become my aesthetic. It has become my personal brand. So I know, Jezmina, we have collaborated on our work and our artwork for our podcast. But yeah, this is really up your alley, too.
Yeah, I can't wait. Katelan, we are so happy to have you here. We're going to talk about glamour magic and art magic and everything, everything in between. So first, let's start off. Would you like to introduce yourself to the audience for anyone who might not be familiar with your work?
My name is Katelan Foisy, and I am a multimedia artist. I probably know my work best from the Smashing Pumpkins, and I've also the illustrator for the Hoodoo Tarot and the Sibyl's Oraculum. I work in many different mediums. I love photography. I love graphic design. I do a lot of the products for Madame Zuzu's, Billy Corgan's Tea House in Highland Park. And I also do a lot of merchandise and visuals for bands and tours.
That's so cool. Katelan, one thing that I love about your work is I feel like you're creating worlds. Like, it's not like, oh, look at my art. It exists here in this one place. It's like, please step into this environment that I've created, this world of creativity, which is so amazing. How did you get here? What was your path?
So I feel like I was always in a place, even from childhood, where I wanted to live in this magical world. When I grew up in Massachusetts, I grew up believing in fairies and building little houses for fairies and filling buttercups with honey and trying to feed them. And I also lived in a very rural place, and there was a lot of nature. And my parents they knew that I was artistic, so they were just like, just let her do what she wants. My mom was like, at a very early age, she was like, you loved mixing patterns, even if they clashed. And she was like, you would just tell me, no, I love the way it looks. I love the way these colors feel.
Romani coded.
I know. No. It so is. And so I think that's where it all started. I know that I got my first tarot deck when I was about 12 years old. And I feel like those images also just sort of fed into that. everything about my world was sort of from, either my grandmother, who I spent a lot of time with, both my grandparents. And my grandmother would do these things, and she had her own aesthetic, and she had her own world that she built too. So I feel like a lot of this is sort of, ancestral family, but also tying into what you were saying, with the Tonight video. It's George Millet. I was very into silent film very early on. I was very into Nosferatu, and a lot of different things that just sort of pulled my curiosity. And so living in a small town for so long, I just used that to kind of like create things. I wanted to, create images. So I had to build props and create my own little worlds there. And then as I got older and went to college and moved, and it started to form, but it was never quite solid. I feel like in the last maybe 15 years, I've really just fully kind of stepped into my aesthetic and what I do and how I want to be perceived, but not only that, but the worlds that I want to create. So I think as a person who grew up, reading lots of books and sort of getting into art and just gobbling up anything that I could and just being so into music, into art, into the magical aspects of things. Because I didn't like what the mundane world always had to offer. I was like, this is not okay. Let me create a little space so that, I can exist. So it was a lot of that. I was, very influenced by Patti Smith. I was very influenced by Jim Carroll, and I was very fortunate at a young age to have met a lot of these people, and they were very kind to me. And they, Jim Carroll would look at my journals, and he was like, you're a really good writer. And I didn't know I was a good writer, but that aspect of it just really created and allowed me to flourish and really allowed me to find a style and find different styles, because I didn't want to be boxed into anything, which, I think for a lot of people, growing up, it's like, oh, well, you find one job and you do that, and that's what you do for the rest of your life. Or you get into school, you find one style, and that's what you do for the rest of your life. And you can't sway away from that. Or if you do, it has to be under a different name, or it has to be under this. And I just wanted everything to be under an umbrella. I was like, I don't have the bandwidth for that. Like, just give me an umbrella and I can have different things, all around me creating this. I know I went off into a bunch of different worlds in that one explanation, but I hope I was clear enough.
Well, I love that. I love that you're really walking us through, how you're just not limited by anything in your artistic sphere, and you're really creating these environments. I think that that's so beautiful, and it sounds like you've always been so influenced. I do want to go back though to talking about getting your first tarot deck at 12. Yeah. Well, how did that happen? What happened for you there? Because you also read tarot and have designed decks, so this is really a world opener there as well.
So it's interesting because originally I started off with like tea leaves, and then a friend of mine, I think we were in Cape Cod or around Provincetown, Massachusetts, and we went into this store, and it was the Mystic Tree of Life, and my friend that was with me, she bought me the deck. So, it was a really sweet gesture, because I would just go around, I would read coffee grounds, I would read, tea leaves and things like that. But she was like, you might be good with this, you like pictures. And so I was like, okay.
That's so sweet.
I know. It's like, you like pictures here. And it ended up being, just this language that I felt I really knew, when you look at the images on a tarot deck. And the thing is, I had played around with with playing cards, before that. So, I just wasn't used to the images on the tarot deck. I knew the diamonds, I knew that, the clubs, I knew that. But when I saw the symbolism in the tarot, it just spoke in another language to me, and I just felt like I understood it right away. The way that two cards can either be interacting with each other or not interacting with each other can tell you so much. The way that it's set up almost like a storyboard, that spoke to me because as a visual person, as a visual artist, even looking at, films and movies, when you see that, you see the storyboards, you can kind of visualize them. And that's what the tarot was for me. It was these storyboards, and each card told its own story, but when you put them together, they told an even in more depth story, and that story would help someone out, or it would give them a map, and I really liked that aspect of it. So it was something that just really resonated with me. And when I did get my first deck too, I ended up sleeping, putting it under my pillow to sleep with. And then every day I would just take a card and I would visualize myself walking through the card. And that's kind of how I really just sort of learned everything. And I did it just for friends for a very long time. And then when I was about, don't quote me on this, I want to say maybe 22, maybe 23, I started working at a botanica in the Bronx, and then I was just reading full time, and it was amazing because just putting yourself in that and just meeting so many people, and I could just share with them those stories and even point out on the cards to them, be like, and this is why I'm saying this, and see how these cards relate to each other. This is why this is coming up, and so it was just this, I know I've said this a couple times, but, it was just a language that I could just really understand.
And you learned in your Romani family tradition too, right? Like I always assumed that about you.
That was more playing cards.
Oh, yeah.
So yeah. So my grandmother had decks of playing cards. And so, but it was like the tarot deck, that's when I saw like the pictures on it. I was always like into, the playing cards with like the queens and the kings and the, and just the imagery on that. But it was like something really unlocked with the tarot images.
Just out of curiosity, did your grandmother have any opinion about you reading tarot? Because I would love to know.
It was weird. Like, so the thing with her is that she just sort of hid everything.
Yeah, as you do when you're a persecuted minority.
So it was just like one of those things where it's just like, oh, she's doing that thing again.
Mm-hmm.
It will pass.
But it's really funny because it's like, it's like a part of it. And then, and at the same time, I think at the time when people are just trying to like acclimate to like their neighborhoods and stuff, they're just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna look at this. No, like then the next minute it's like, no, I wasn't doing that. Like,
yeah, assimilation is a bitch. Yeah, that's so interesting because like when I also was raised reading playing cards, just for listeners who might not know, Roma are a diasporic ethnic group, also originally from India, also known as Gypsies, technically the racial slur. So most of us prefer Roma, not Romanian, it's a different thing. And I also learned on playing cards, and my grandmother said something so similar to what you said when I was like, okay, tarot's more popular. I think I should be using this for clients. She was like, oh, you already know how to do it. Like, because you read cards. So it's just it's the same language. And I was just like, oh, okay. And sometimes I would bounce things off of her, but mostly she was just, and I don't think it's actually a one-to-one playing cards tarot at all.
Yeah.
But there was something about like having that basis in cartomancy and understanding symbols and just being like, you're good. Like,
yeah, you're good. Like, you're doing your thing.
Thank you for that aside. I was curious.
Yeah, it's interesting because like other family members were like, oh, what is she doing? And so it was a very weird, just sort of strange thing where some family members were like looking down on it, and then the other family members were fine with it. So, and I think that's tension in any family where it's like, these two different sets of opinions, and definitely different generations in which they grew up with things.
Can relate. Yeah. And the way that you create worlds, going back to Jess's first question, I mean, you have a home good line and interior design, you have album covers, you have tarot, and I really love that you don't want to put yourself in an aesthetic box. But I'm curious about when you were trying to describe what your aesthetic is and how what is for you. Are there certain things that you look at when you're considering a client or considering a new thing you want to come out with? How do you know what lights you up and what direction you're drawn in?
So, I mean, obviously I am very pattern oriented. I love patterns on patterns. They're throughout my house. But it really depends. So a lot of the stuff that I worked on with the pumpkins, it usually has a certain aesthetic, and usually Billy has a very concrete idea, or not concrete, but he has a good idea of what he wants, and we discuss, kind of what style it should be in, and we kind of go from there. So it really depends on the client. I've had other clients where they, send me samples of an aesthetic that they like, maybe it's a vintage thing or something like that. And they're like, is there any way that you can kind of do this, but not totally copy it, and I'm like, okay, yeah, let me take a shot at this. So I have a lot of different styles, which can be very confusing. I understand that I am a person that wears many different hats. The cool thing about having many different styles, but also just being me, is that a lot of people, even if they see a style that's different, they were like, I automatically knew it was yours. It just has this feeling of you. And that's something that I've always sort of aspired to, especially when I was in college. I went to Pratt Institute. One of my teachers, Rudy Gutierrez, he was telling me, he was like, as long as your work feels like you, people will know it's yours. And I really just resonated with that, because I was like, okay, I don't want to be boxed into one style. I want to do a number of different things. I want my home to be beautiful because I work here and I'm here all the time. And it needs to have that aesthetic. It needs to feel calming. It needs that. But with work that is, sometimes I'm doing pen and ink, sometimes I'm doing Art Deco, sometimes I'm doing Victoriana, sometimes I'm doing a painting. So my main focus is just to make some part of it feel like me.
Oh, I so heavily relate to this. That's why I'm smiling and nodding so much. Working in the fashion space, everyone is so serious and they like a certain sort of clean aesthetic. And I always say you can recognize when I have touched something because it's going to be fucking whimsical.
Yes.
And it's going to be fucking joyful. So I love that. I really love that. I think that it's so interesting too, because you're working in these spaces that even though you're describing your aesthetic as being sort of more specific and more connected to who you are, they're at scale. I mean, you're creating merchandise, you're creating, tea house environments, you're, designing so much that has to somehow feel good to a large audience. And I love that it's so authentically connected, not just to you, but to your roots and magic and all of your practices. So how do you translate those sort of ideas into a larger commercial kind of space without abandoning, the authenticity of it?
So I feel very blessed because working with Billy, we have so many of the same ideas and aesthetics that it's very easy. And he is a person that really thinks outside the box. So in that aspect, it's very easy to work with him. It's very easy to, kind of combine our skills and create something really beautiful. It's also terrifying. When I did uh Agori Me, it was really terrifying because I knew that this album was going to go out to the masses. And when I'm in it and when I'm working on it, I don't think I realize how big something is because I'm like, I just want to make my friend happy. Like, just that's what I want to do. And then it gets into the realistic part where you're like, okay, I've got to, go over these lyrics and make sure everything is okay and the spacing is okay and there's no uh there's nothing I need to change or there's no mistakes or anything like that. And then I, immediately tailspin into a downward spiral. And but it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I think if I just don't think of it on a massive scale, it's easier for me. And if I just think of it as, okay, I am working with, my friend or my client, and I am creating something that represents them. And, this is in, my style. So of course, like it's going to be certain color palettes, or it's going to be something, some type of line work or something like that, that has my aesthetic. But with that, I kind of have to just get out of my head and not realize how big it's going to be. Because if I think about that, then I just start kind of getting consumed in the details. Or what if I make a mistake? Or, what if I do this? So for me, it really is about just being in that moment and just being like, okay, what does my client want? And, how can I best represent that? And just putting that out there. I mean, it's very interesting how I even got, in this whole business is, I went to Pratt for illustration and communications design. And, immediately out of school, one of my biggest clients was the Grammy Awards, and I was terrified. And it was one of those things where it was just like, okay, you got to take yourself out of this. And afterwards, I was kicking myself. I was like, maybe the work wasn't good enough. And I was like, they wouldn't have accepted if it wasn't good enough. Like, I don't know what I'm doing. But apparently that never left my brain. So
That's powerful. To be finding a way to work through the fear of being seen, I think.
Yeah, you and I have had many conversations about this.
So many. And this is the question I wanted to ask next was about what's the intersection for you for, fashion, music, art, and magic. But I also imagine a certain amount of your spiritual practices and, artistic practices also help you navigate that fear of being seen. So that's a sort of bonus add-on.
Yeah,
You navigate that too.
It definitely is because, I am accepting the fact that, like not everyone is going to like what I do. And there are always people that are going to think that, it could have been different. It could have been whatever. So it can be hard being seen because you have to be very thick-skinned, and I'm not very thick-skinned. Very sensitive.
Those little babies.
We're just little babies. But, I do feel that when I am, dressed in fashion that I like, when I am in my power, because fashion, it is very powerful. It's your essence. It's, so sometimes I'll be like, okay, I haven't literally left the house in a couple days. Like I'm still in the same slip. Let me just put on a really nice robe. And like, there. Now I'm fashion, but it's one of those things that really boosts me. Like I said, too, with my home, like it's one of those things that I am in a much happier space and able to kind of think clearly and freely when I feel good about myself. So I'm dressed in something that I like. When I have a good workspace and it's surrounded by plants and things that I love. And so I feel much more in myself. And And even with like the practices, I feel like when I'm creating art, I'm almost in a meditative state anyway, because it's like I'm just creating these things and I'm putting them together. And especially when I do drawings and I'm kind of like piecing them together, on my computer, that just puts me into this really meditative state because I'm just like, okay, it's like these pieces, it's where do they fit? Where can I create this design? So for me, my spiritual practice and also spiritual baths, I'm going to talk about spiritual baths for like the rest of my life because whenever I'm like really just in that space and or working on a very big corporate project where there's like a lot of energy going into it and there's a lot of emails coming in and I'm really overwhelmed because it's like I've got to have answers and I don't quite know the answers and I've got to figure out the answers. And then very tight deadlines. I did one project recently where in 2 weeks I had to do 22 pieces of art. And it was also, there was writing involved. And I think that ended up being like 100 pages. And I had to design that and I had to do all of these things that were all parts of these projects that I was working on. And so it was really hard for me. And I was like, I feel like I'm kind of losing myself. And, my partner, he's like, you should go out for a walk. And I was like, I don't want to go for a walk. It's like, I want to sit here and look at my computer and be mad like that I can't figure something out. But, he was getting me out of the house, which is very good. And then I realized I was like, I got to take a spiritual bath because I am just, in my head right now and a little too in my head. And I need some clarity and I need to come back to these like multiple projects that I'm working on and, be able to kind of go in between them. So I am a huge fan of those. And I feel like that, sets everything in motion. I'm also just a huge fan of, drinking tea and just, having plant allies and just being like, okay, I know that when I drink, rooibos, I always pronounce it wrong. So if I do, I'm sorry. Tea, I feel very like in my space, in my body. I know that if I drink mint tea that I'm automatically like more energized. And if I drink a combination of hibiscus and mint and rosemary and cinnamon, then I know that I'm going to be calmed down and I'm going to be ready to go. And that was a recipe that my friend at Dear Woman,
I love them.
I know. She gave me, so Jessica gave me that. And so I know that when I'm eating certain things, just like my mom told me that when she was pregnant with me, she ate strawberries every single day. And I'm obsessed with strawberries. So I know that if I eat some strawberries, I'm automatically just going to feel more in myself too. And I can get back to that work that needs to be done.
That's beautiful. Because it's such intentional self-care. You can, yes, depending on how you feel personally, as anyone listening, you can dress it up as magic, dress it down as taking good, attentive care of yourself. Mm-hmm. But that in itself is a beautiful devotional practice.
Yeah.
And I love that you're talking about all of this and that Jez said intention, because that was my next question. I've heard another interview where you were talking about speaking into your coffee every morning. I also do this.
Oh, I love that.
Just that thought. And I was really imagining, you starting your day that way and having that level of intention that early in the day. I imagine that you're incorporating that into every practice. So although you're calling yourself a little baby that doesn't want to be perceived, I imagine you're really going into everything that you do with just a level of intention and wanting to set things in motion and visualizing how that outcome is going to be. So would you consider that a practice within itself as well?
I do. I think that anytime I get a chance to make magic out of like the mundane, I'm trying to. It's been on my mind a lot because, there's so many times like we go to work or, and I've worked many different jobs, so I've worked in offices, I've worked in retail, I've worked, behind a copy machine, and I've done a lot of different jobs, and I feel like, sometimes they can feel like they're sucking the life out of you and you're just like, oh, I don't want to be here. But then if you incorporate these tiny things, it just makes the day go by and it just really enhances it. And you're like, okay, so now this is a little bit more fun. This is, I can kind of get my head in this space to work. And, and it's funny too, because like anytime we're working on something, it's like we always have to stop ourselves from getting like, just like in our way too in our heads. And like I love everything that I do and everyone that I work with. So, like I work with a bunch of different people. But it can be really hard. So I think it's important to have those little practices. I think it's really important, you know, just to even, I like to spray 4711. My grandmother used to wear 4711, and I like to spray it when I'm like also in my head a little bit too much. And I'm just like, okay, this reminds me of my grandmother. And, it's also cleansing me and I can kind of get back in that space. So just little things. I think, when people think of magic, they're thinking of like full on rituals a lot of the time, and they don't realize that there's like tiny practices that you can do. You can look in the mirror, like you can say a miracle is going to happen today, and that's something that like, been saying for a really long time, but, it's just these little intentions. You can, pull a card. You can do bibliomancy. You can do tiny things just to kind of guide you. And you can even do color walks where it's like you walk down the street and you choose a color and then you just try to focus on everything that's color. And it just gets you out of that space. So these are like small acts of magic. And some of the biggest transformations are just from shifting the energy. So you take a different route somewhere and it's like you've completely shifted the energy from what it was. So I really, really believe in the power of small things.
Yeah.
Love, love.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. I'm wondering too, like what kind of tools are you using for your own divination and healing at the moment? I'm sure that goes through its evolutions, but what is sparking you right now?
So obviously I do a lot with my tarot deck. And I also use the Sibyl's Oraculum because it's just so like gives you a core issue, it gives you a projection, and then it gives you two, things to do to kind of get out of whatever you're in. And I'm like, okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate you giving me homework.
Yeah.
Can I ask,
Really,
is that an oracle deck? What
It is.
Okay.
It is.
which
It's
is illustrated.
Yes, I illustrated it. Tiana Lee
Ah.
McQuiller, she wrote it, and she also wrote the Hoodoo Tarot. And so it's based on the Black Doves of Africa, and so there's a lot of mosaics in there. It is an oracle deck that, plays on Greek and Roman, myth and stories, but also just very logical advice. It's very interesting whenever I use this deck because some of the answers are so simple and you can be really lost in your head. And like there's one card that's like the confusion card, and it's a bunch of fish all like in this dark water just like all bumping into each other. And you get that card and you're like, yeah, I am confused. But it's like, okay, are you making this more confusing than it has to be? Can you simplify it? And you're like, oh, I can.
It feels very Pisces coded. I'm not gonna lie. A bunch of fish being confused and bumping into each other.
There's like, a card, that's rage, and then there's one that's defense. And like the whole, premise of the defense card is to protect your goals and your dreams from anyone that's trying to harm them, including yourself. And I'm like, oh, no, leave me alone. Let me self-sabotage in peace. But yeah, and then I also like doing bibliomancy. Sometimes I use fairy tales and sometimes I use the Bible. It really depends on like what I'm, sort of near and what the mood is, because fairy tales have a lot to say. And so I love like opening up to a fairy tale and being like, okay, what do I need to learn from this? or just like a Bible verse or, something like that. I really love, just sort of diving into a lot of different things. Recently I got back into doing more scrying, black mirrors, and so because I was like, you know what, it's always interesting what they tell me. It can be a little scary at times because, staring into a mirror with a candle and you see your face morph and you're like, wait a minute, this isn't cool. But then
It's
you're like,
a unique
oh,
experience.
this is my shadow side, and this is
Really, do you want to share a little bit more about scrying, just in case anyone who's listening is
yeah.
not familiar? Because it's such a cool practice, and I want to hear more about how you do it. But just in case anyone is like, what is that?
Yeah, so there's like a few different ways that you can do it. You can do it with a bowl of water and put some black ink in it and then put a candle next to it. The main thing is that you want to be kind of like in a dark space and just very little light so that you can kind of see the reflection that's coming through. Sometimes I do it with just a candle, and just watch the flame and see what comes out there. Or you can do it with a black mirror or obsidian stone mirror, or, anything that's like a darker color, and you just sort of steady yourself and you look at the flame and then you look at the reflection, and it takes a while. You're going to sit there and you're going to see a whole lot of nothing for a while, and you're going to be really bored. And and then one day just something shifts, and at first you're going to get, like, for me, the first time I did it, I got scared because I saw something that was in the mirror, and I was like, what is this? And then I was like, wait a minute, I don't want to be startled out of this. I got to get back into that zone. And the main thing that you want to do is just to kind of get out of your head, which is not an easy thing to do. But what I like to do is I like to make my eyes get them out of focus and just sort of relax a little bit, and then just sort of stare at the mirror, and your face will start to shift. And then maybe you'll see little shadows or pictures or something like that. Nothing, if you want, you can write it down, but sometimes that breaks the concentration a little bit. So usually I just let it roll until like I feel like I've kind of popped out of it, and then I'll write it down and maybe try it again. But it is something that you just kind of have to understand that it may take a while. It took me a while to really be able to put myself into that state. It took me a while to not get freaked out by some of the things, that you see, because you will see shadow aspects of yourself, and, they're not very pretty. And then you'll get some good information too. You may even go to bed that night and get some really interesting information from your dreams. So, it's one of those things where it's like, if you practice it enough, you will definitely see something that you need to see.
I really love this. And even going back to what you were saying about the oracle, right? It's that sort of pragmatic, like, here's the problem, here's the message, here's the solution. So if someone's working through their divination, or even you kind of know your vibe, you're like, I need a line from a book today, or I need to do some mirror work. Where do you come out of that and know what to do next? Is it protection work? Is it like realizing that there might be sort of like an evil eye energy that you want to remove? What do you do to kind of get to the solution piece?
So I always look for things that are not so much signs, but indicators. I look for indicators. So for instance, if I'm getting a lot of evil eye, then my sink will clog, my toilet will clog, my bathtub will clog, my dishwasher won't work. So it's all of these things all at once. And I'm like, and it'll be like, like everything's clogging and like there's nothing there, and it's like, why isn't this working? So I noticed that every time something like that happened, and of course, like apartments and houses, they're going to have breakdowns, but it's almost like there's a few different things. And then my house will feel different. I'll be like, why does it feel like it's dirty? Like dirty. And I'm like, this is not okay, because I know I cleaned it. But So, I'll know then that I've kind of got to do, either some protection or, like a cleansing or something like that. Another thing, that each person, it's probably something kind of personal that will be an indicator for them. So I almost feel like, bringing the tarot into it is like you become the hangman. You just watch what's around you and say like, okay, so whenever I feel off, what are these little indicators that something's happening? And then sometimes there's big indicators like, like if a bird smashes into your window, like, okay, that's
That's a
pretty
big
big.
one.
That's a big one. That happened to me one time, and it happened to my friend. We were both on the phone, and we were like, "What?"
At the same time?
At the same time.
It's wild.
And so we're like, "We need to get off the phone. We need to do cleansing right now."
Oh my God.
Or, you're trying to talk to someone about something. I remember I was talking to someone on the phone, and both of our phones would hang up over and over. Like we would just like lose like the call over and over until we stopped talking about this certain thing, and then it didn't drop the call anymore. So, there are indicators. And I think that's something that we just need to sort of like watch for, in our own lives. Like if you see something and you start making the connection. And I do want to say, like, you just have to be careful because it's like not every single time something happens does it mean that there's evil eye, but it's usually a combination of things. And then, maybe you'll lose your appetite too. And you're just like, oh, I just don't feel like, eating, or I I'm so tired and I can't figure it out. And nothing has changed really. Um, or, you have a series of like these like series of unfortunate events. And you're just like, wait a minute, what's happening here? And the thing is, like with the internet now, like it's so weird because like anyone can look at you at any time and they could, like take one look at you and be like, I hate that person. And it's just like, okay, like, but, sometimes obsessive energy itself can be, powerful and can kind of like get at you. I don't think for me personally, like once I have the indicators, I'm like, ugh, let me just like get this off. I don't think anything is, so crazy that I can't handle. But there are people that do enjoy hating on people. And as weird as it is to me, there are people that enjoy that, or there are people that are obsessed with other people. And that energy can get really tangled up and knotted up really quick. And so, when you are in that, it is really important to kind of just have certain tools and systems in place for you to kind of get out of that.
Yeah, I love that explanation because the evil eye is so common for anyone who didn't grow up with it. It's really just the concept that people's jealousy or ill will can be transferred onto with a look.
Yeah.
And because, I mean, anyone who's listening, you've probably been in a bad mood before and been like, look at that bitch over there eating crackers like she owns the place.
Yeah.
It happens.
And so she thinks she is.
Yeah. Like the cleansing and the protection can also just be a part of your everyday, like, wearing an amulet or like
Absolutely.
any of the things that you suggested. And it also is reminding me too, part of the big reason we wanted to talk to you, and we did touch on it. You were talking about wearing the robe and doing things to make yourself feel better and how that shifts your energy. But we've talked before about how glamour magic is a kind of protection as well. And I would love to hear, your thoughts on glamour magic and how people can integrate it into their day to day, just to feel better, but also to be protected and do the things you want to do.
Yeah. So glamour magic is amazing because, it's just a series of small actions. There's a story about Marilyn Monroe, and Marilyn Monroe is in the subway and no one notices who she is. And so I forgot the photographer's name, but she looks over at the photographer and she was like, do you want to see me become her? And they were like, yeah. And they said all she did was a slight shift, and all of a sudden, everyone was like, Marilyn Monroe's in the subway, Marilyn Monroe's in the subway. But before that, no one even knew it was her. So I always think of glamour magic as just these tiny movements to really just, either bring focus to you in a room. Say you have to give a presentation. My friend Veronica Varlow, taught me that when you go to, a party or a place where you need to present or something like that, you stand in the doorway for a moment, you pull back your shoulders, you stand tall, and you stand there and you look from side to side. You just take a moment before stepping in, and automatically the attention is there on you, the focus is there on you, and people will start to come up to you. You don't even have to do anything else. People will just start coming up to you. And that's, the simplest glamour magic. Glamour magic as well. I love mirrors. I love antique mirrors. I love mirrors in homes. I just think they're so beautiful, and I love them. But each mirror in my house has its own specific job, quote unquote. It's say, I have a compact mirror and I need to feel more confident, then I will look in that compact mirror. And I designated that compact mirror only for confidence. Or, for instance, evil eye, going back to evil eye. Some of the mirrors in my house act as funhouse mirrors. So they give, a distorted version of something that, if someone is trying to kind of look in on me. And it just gives, like the funhouse effect where it's like, here's a warped version, but it's not real. You can use mirrors to send bad energy back. There's a lot of, I think in feng shui, if you put a mirror by the door, it sends back, any negativity. So, with glamour, like there's so many different aspects to it, but one of my favorites is just for confidence. And that's why I love mirrors so much, because I feel like, if you say, for instance, have a compact mirror and you take your favorite oil and you clean the mirror and then you circle around the mirror, 9 times with that oil, and you just sort of speak into the mirror that this is for confidence. And every time you open that up, it's specifically showing you this version of yourself that is in their best. Then that's something very powerful and very beautiful.
I love this. Just keep going back to that intention and the purpose that you hold in all of these objects and everything that you do, and that is the magic itself. Do you translate that into your work? Are you inserting any kind of symbolism or any sort of art, sigils, anything at all that sort of adds a level of protection and keeps you from being perceived in a way you don't want to be?
Yes, I have a few things that I do. So I've always loved photography because I feel like the way that you edit a photo can become, a shield in itself. If you use filters, it filters out what you don't want. Think of it that way. I like to edit my photos like in Photoshop sometimes, and sometimes I just don't have time, and I'm going through different apps and filters and whatever. But I'm always, thinking of that. It's like, okay, this is filtering out negativity. This is only showing what I want to present. And I feel like that can be a very good protection, because even as much as like we all love and hate social media, it's like, oh, it's nice to be inspired. It's like wonderful to see what, friends are up to. There's also these really negative aspects to it. That's why I always say the internet is the monkey's paw. And if you haven't read The Monkey's Paw, you need to, because it is the best magical text ever in existence. And it's be careful what you wish for. You just may get it. And that's what the internet is. It's like this free form where everyone gets to speak, and then there's these underbellies of trolls and other things. So, in that aspect, filters and things like that can be incredible, protective filters, or it could be glamour filters, and then also even like your social media page. I mean, what are you putting out there? I just had a conversation with some people the other day, and someone once told me that they thought of their Instagram like their own private magazine, and they just put out there whatever they would like to see. in a magazine, but it was their own, curation. And, I feel like that for me. I'm like, what do I want to put out there? I want to put out inspiring stuff. I want to put out interesting things. I want to play around with different characters and things like that. So, for again, like photography, filters, edits, all of that. When I did Machina, the reissue for Madame Zuzu's, for Smashing Pumpkins, I mean, that is such an esoteric album in itself that, I made sigils for the album, listening to the songs and just, creating that. I also, the album, I mean, it's being shipped at the end of the month, so people who have ordered it will see, all the things that we put in. But Billy really allowed me to, because I understand a lot of like the esoteric, aspects of the album. He allowed me to just really kind of go into it and see what came up. So we did that. And so I can't talk about too much until people see it, but they can see the little images online right now, for snippets. And when I did the stage at Madame Zuzu's, I put an Edelweiss flower in the center of it because I was like, there's only going to be like loving energy that steps through here. We don't want anyone who's going to bring down the party. We don't want anyone who's going to try to absorb or, make a place negative. So it just became this like really loving, symbol for the space. So there's a lot of things that I do in my art. I mean, even when I'm, working with butterflies, drawing butterflies, this is all, part of the transformation. And when I did my home line, I drew those, the big cats because I was like in a weird place myself. And I was like, what energy is coming out of here? It's big cat energy, but I also just wanted it to be this really sort of powerful piece that just stood on its own, but also was just protective because big cats are protective.
Can you actually tell us a little more about your home line? Because we haven't talked about that, and I am so excited about it.
Oh, thank you. I'm trying to expand on it, but right now I have some pillows and I have some journals. And in the future, I want to do purses and robes. I mean, obviously robes.
Of course.
Of course. And headscarves.
I must ask, do you have Taurus placements that are
certainly.
I am a Taurus.
I have never met a Taurus that I will go on work trips, I will go on friend trips, and I will turn around and they will be in a robe the second I turn around. Like, I don't know what it is, but a robe screams Taurus. So thank you for the confirmation.
And they have to be like really fashionable robes.
Yes.
The pretty robe.
It has to be the pretty robe, or else we're not wearing it.
I love this confirmation. Yes.
But it's but yeah, so I created this home line because obviously, my home is very special to me and it is my sanctuary. And so I wanted pieces that were affordable, but that would also just decorate and, be sort of statement pieces in themselves. Because a lot of times, like, people don't have like, hundreds or thousands of dollars to spend on a piece of art, but they have maybe like $50 to spend on a pillow, and a pillow will last, a very long time, as long as you're not jumping on it and, throwing it at people and, which you could do if you'd like. It's fun. But I am expanding it, and it's very much, in the works right now. And, like I said, I'm hoping to expand it to robes, and I really want to do headscarves, and I would really like to do small bags. And at some point I would love to do a tassiography cup, but I just haven't figured out how to do that quite yet.
Oh, I would really like that. Yeah, that sounds wonderful. I mean, and I love the way that, you were in apartment therapy, right? Your house was in apartment therapy, and you've modeled for Loli by Zita Moldovan.
Yes.
There's an indigenous designer you have posed
Yes,
to.
Jamie Okuma.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
I just bought another one of her dresses. I can't stop myself.
They're so good. Everyone needs to go buy both of these designers, or at least like drool what you see. But I just feel like that's such a natural progression for you. Like I love your social media because you do share a lot of what you wear, what you make, and where you live, but it does feel very boundaried. And like I love that as a great example for glamour magic. I always send people to your social media when this is what I mean. Do this.
I think it's important. I mean, I think it's important to have boundaries. I mean, for me, I remember, being on Live Journal all those years ago and just like, girl, you did not need to tell every aspect of your life, like every date, how it went. I'm like, what was I thinking? I guess I just needed an outlet,
Thank God Live Journal is dead.
It was a different time.
It was a different time. It was
really
definitely
was.
a different time. But, as I've gotten older, I really appreciate my privacy. And I was like, not everything needs to be online. Like my relationship doesn't need to be online. My private moments. I love sharing fashion. I love sharing, different aspects of my life. I will tell personal stuff because I feel like that's important. I feel like, when artists are trying to work through a project or anyone, for example, is trying to work through a project and they're really, stumbling on it or, like they're really just like, I'm not good enough for this because we have all been through that. But when you're going through it, you're very alone. And, so I feel like, okay, like I've got to share these parts of myself that can, possibly help. But I'm not going to share when, I'm in a horrific mood and, and just about to say some stupid things and get myself in a worse mood. And, I was like, I don't need that on the internet. I really don't. But my whole thing is I just want to show people that having a magical world, an artistic world, a creative world is possible for anyone. It's not just if you have a bunch of money, you can go to the dollar store, you can get some foam core, you can get some paint and some, oh my God, what is that brown paper called? I forget what it's called, but a roll of
like a craft paper.
Yeah, the craft paper.
Yeah.
Do that, and then create like your own giant half, crescent moon if you want for your, your apartment. I've done that before, and I literally went to the dollar store to get all that.
I think I remember that moon.
Yes, I still have it. It's in here, but I mean, it's not on display right now. But it's just these little things. People always ask me. I was like, you can go to a thrift store and just find some things, some beautiful scarves, things like that, to kind of create these worlds. So it's easy when you can break out of the mold and do that. And that's also why I created this home line too. And why I want to expand it is just so that, people can have these little bits of magic in their own homes.
I'm so glad you're doing that.
Yeah, thank you. I love this. And I want to be part of every world that you're creating. Besides your home goods line, what other projects should everyone come and check out that you're working on?
A lot of them aren't out yet. So it's going to be over the course of the next year. A lot of things will be coming out. But the most recent thing that I have, that just came out is Smashing Pumpkins, the Machina box set that you can get from Madame Zuzu's. If you are a Machina fan, it's one of my favorite Smashing Pumpkins albums. I love it. And also Chrome Jets, another Smashing Pumpkins single just came out. And I'm currently working on my Substack, which is I'm shifting the focus to making magic out of the mundane. So it's basically I'm going to be, sharing different things that I do to kind of shift the energy, but it's also going to be like, taking you down memory lane to like 1980s, Halloween. And, just like nurturing the inner child. Yeah, like who doesn't like that? So it's a lot of I won't say it's eclectic, but it's a bit eclectic because it's just whatever I'm sort of inspired by. So one entry will be, images or photographers that I'm inspired by, things like that. But that's like my personal, Substack that I'm working on right now. And I have a project with Diana Dagas coming up pretty soon. I would say within like the next few weeks to a month, we have a project and it's called Ace of Cups, and it's working with the Tarot's Aces. So
cool.
Yeah, it's super cool. So I'm excited about that. And as these projects that I have finished but will come out in the future, as they come about, I will be sharing them on my Instagram and my Facebook pages. So
Yeah, and you have a whole beautiful evil eye section in Secrets of Romani Fortune Telling.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, my book with Paulina Stevens. So everyone should check that out for a really lovely evil eye ritual that Paulina and I also do.
Amazing.
Really love it. Get that evil eye off of you.
Exactly.
This was so fun. Thank you so much for being here. We will put links to your website and social media and everything in the show notes so folks can find it there. And since this is coming out in October, a few of the things that you mentioned might actually be out. So definitely be checking.
Absolutely. Yeah, at least one of them, two of them probably be out.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. This was so beautiful.
Oh, thank you so much for having me.
So fun.
Yes.
Thank you everyone for joining us again in our immaterial world.
I like to see you shining on your dreams. You're a special kind of magic. Show me all your favorite things. You're pretty like a sunset. You're pretty like a pearl. You're a special kind of magic. Dancing in a crazy swirl. In a crazy swirl. Immaterial world, come meet me in the immaterial world. As far as the galaxy goes, we're flying in the immaterial world. Immaterial world, come meet me in the immaterial world. Your mind, your body and soul, delighted in the immaterial world. The immaterial world. The immaterial world.
Immaterial World is hosted by Jessica Richards and Jezmina von Thiele. Music by Thiele. Artwork by Lane Friend. Follow us at Immaterial World Pod on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube. Visit our website at www.immaterial-world.com or send us an email at immaterialworldpod@gmail.com. Thank you for being part of our immaterial world.
Welcome to the immaterial world.